It's December 16th, 1985. The neon glow of Manhattan flickers like electricity in the cold winter air. Wall Street brokers hurry home through streets slick with rain. Cabs honk in the shadows of towering glass buildings. Outside Sparks Steakhouse on East 46th Street, 4 men stand waiting. Their breath forms misty clouds in the December chill. They speak softly, blending into the city's noise. A black Lincoln sedan glides up to the curb. From inside steps a man in a camel-colored overcoat. His silver hair is carefully combed back. His eyes are those of a man used to commanding obedience. His name is Paul Castellano, but on the streets he's known simply as Big Paul. Within seconds, gunfire shatters the night. Muzzle flashes sparkle like paparazzi bulbs. Paul Castellano falls to the pavement, blood pooling onto the wet sidewalk. Beside him, his driver Thomas Bilotti collapses, lifeless. New York gasps. The boss of bosses is dead. Yet this was only the final act in a story that began decades earlier. In the butcher shops of Brooklyn, in immigrant homes where poverty and loyalty were as tangible as the scent of garlic and sausage. It's the story of a man who tried to transform the mafia into a corporate empire and paid the ultimate price. But few could have imagined how far the butcher's son would rise, or how violently he would fall. Paul Castellano was born on June 26, 1915, in Brooklyn, New York. His full name was Costantino Paul Castellano. His parents, Giuseppe and Concetta Castellano, were among millions of Italians who had crossed the Atlantic in search of a better life. Sicily, their homeland, was a place of ancient traditions and rigid hierarchies. Honor, loyalty, and silence were not just virtues. They were necessities for survival. Giuseppe Castellano became a butcher in Brooklyn, a respectable trade in a community that prized good food and trusted men who wielded sharp knives. But Brooklyn in the early 20th century was not merely a patchwork of ethnic neighborhoods. It was a boiling pot of ambition, hardship, and underground networks. The Italian enclaves, known for tight-knit families and Catholic devotion, also bred secret societies. Mutual aid organizations sometimes shielded darker enterprises, loan sharking, protection rackets, and the whisper of the mafia, La Cosa Nostra. It's worth noting that at this time, America was still suspicious of Italians. Newspaper editorials painted them as criminals. Police labeled them as anarchists or radicals. This environment shaped the immigrant experience and the young minds growing up amid whispers of secret power. Paul Castellano's early years were modest. His family lived in Brooklyn's Brownsville section, a neighborhood of brick tenements, laundry lines, and the daily rhythms of immigrant survival. His parents believed in hard work. Education was secondary to labor and loyalty. From behind his father's butcher counter, young Paul learned 2 vital lessons: the importance of discretion and how money could open any door. Paul Castellano left school after the 8th grade. Some say he had little interest in books. Others suggest his father believed the family business offered a more reliable future. Either way, Paul joined the butcher shop, learning to carve meat with precision. But the shop was more than a workplace. It was a neighborhood hub where local businessmen, hustlers, and aspiring wise guys gathered. Conversations flowed between sales of pork chops and sausages. Who owed who money? Which politicians could be bought? Which businesses needed protection? Young Paul absorbed it all like a sponge. At age 19, he was arrested for robbery. He served just 3 months, a minor stint by mafia standards. but it marked him as a man willing to do business outside the law. It's an irony worth pondering. A boy who learned to wield knives for meat would one day give silent signals that sealed men's deaths. During the 1930s, prohibition ended, but organized crime didn't fade. Instead, it evolved. Bootleggers shifted into unions, construction, and high finance. Paul Castellano was watching, waiting, ready to step into a world where loyalty and ambition determined survival. World War II reshaped New York. Soldiers returned home. Industries roared back to life. Skyscrapers soared higher than ever. For the mafia, it was a golden era. Castellano joined the Mangano crime family, which eventually became known as the Gambino family. He started as a soldier, the foot soldier of organized crime. But Paul was different. He saw opportunity not just in street crime, but in business. He built bridges between legitimate enterprises and mob influence. In the 1950s, he became involved in the poultry industry. His meat businesses flourished, supplying restaurants and markets across New York. Yet behind the scenes, he enforced mafia-controlled prices, forcing competitors out through threats or sabotage. His fortune grew. So did his influence. By the late 1960s, he was promoted to capo regime, a captain running his own crew. His operations expanded into labor unions, construction bids, and the lucrative concrete industry that paved New York's booming skyline. And then came the pivotal moment. October 1976. Carlo Gambino, boss of the Gambino family, died of natural causes. The criminal underworld held its breath. Many assumed Aniello della Croce, the tough underboss and old-school mobster, would succeed him. Instead, Gambino's will named Paul Castellano as his heir. It was a shocking decision. Castellano was seen as a white-collar mobster. He wore tailored suits, preferred quiet negotiations over bloodshed, and viewed organized crime like a corporate enterprise. Yet he commanded respect. He knew the business. He controlled money. Under Castellano's leadership, the Gambino family transformed into a powerful economic machine. Construction unions fell under mob influence. Government contracts were rigged. No-show jobs flourished, with mob soldiers earning salaries for work they never performed. Castellano's concrete cartel controlled millions in building projects across Manhattan. Even legitimate companies paid tribute to avoid trouble. It is worth noting that during this period, Castellano's estimated personal wealth soared into the tens of millions. He built an opulent mansion on Staten Island, modeled after the White House, a visible sign of how he saw himself, a CEO of organized crime. But his rise left enemies brewing beneath the surface. Paul Castellano believed organized crime should evolve into a business empire, discreet, controlled, and sophisticated. But many old-school mafiosi saw this as arrogance. Soldiers like John Gotti resented Castellano's hands-off style. While Paul enjoyed gourmet meals in his Staten Island mansion, soldiers like Gotti risked prison hustling on the streets. Tensions deepened over money. Castellano demanded a hefty cut from narcotics profits, yet forbade dealing drugs entirely. Many ignored him, pocketing fortunes in heroin and cocaine. Meanwhile, the FBI was closing in. Castellano's home was bugged by federal agents. Conversations about mob business, union payoffs, and even personal affairs filled hours of secret recordings. Among the most damaging revelations were rumors about Castellano's relationship with his Colombian maid, Gloria Olarte. The FBI's recordings captured intimate conversations and even petty domestic arguments. For mob soldiers, this was embarrassing. The boss was supposed to be dignified, above scandal. In March 1984, Castellano and other mafia leaders were indicted in the so-called commission case. Prosecutors aimed to dismantle the entire mafia hierarchy. Castellano faced the possibility of decades behind bars. Yet, even as his legal troubles mounted, his inner circle remained divided. Historians still debate Castellano's true leadership style. Some describe him as brilliant, a visionary who saw the mafia's future in legitimate industries. Others call him cold and disconnected, blind to the dangers brewing among his own men. John Gotti's crew, particularly from the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club in Queens, began discussing whether Castellano should be removed. Gotti feared Castellano might order him killed to protect his empire and avoid law enforcement heat. Meanwhile, rumors flew through New York's underworld. Castellano was planning to restructure the family, possibly removing dangerous capos like Gotti. Despite popular belief, there's no definitive evidence Castellano ordered some of the high-profile hits attributed to him. But the perception was enough to seal his fate. In the mafia, perception is often more lethal than truth. Excellent. Let's continue the script seamlessly from where we left off, expanding into the concluding parts of the one-hour documentary. By the autumn of 1985, Paul Castellano's empire teetered on the brink. His legal battles consumed millions of dollars in attorney fees. FBI surveillance yielded hundreds of hours of incriminating tapes. Federal prosecutors were determined to crush the mafia's ruling commission once and for all. Meanwhile, inside his own family, respect for Castellano eroded. The whispers grew louder. Paul was seen as distant, obsessed with money and luxury, out of touch with the realities of street life. His mansion on Staten Island became a symbol of how far he'd drifted from the gritty neighborhoods where he'd begun. John Gotti and his allies believed Castellano might turn government witness to save himself. Whether this was true remains debatable. But in the underworld, even a rumor can be a death sentence. And so, a plan was set in motion. On December 16, 1985, Castellano arranged to meet his top lieutenants at Sparks Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan. His driver, Thomas Bilotti, was at the wheel of their black Lincoln. As the car rolled up to the curb, 4 assassins closed in. Gunfire exploded. Castellano was hit multiple times in the head and chest. Bilotti never had a chance to draw his weapon. Blood spilled across the pavement, soaking into the slushy December snow. Midtown Manhattan became a crime scene under the glare of neon lights. Newspapers the next day screamed headlines, "Mafia boss slain in Midtown hit. Castellano gunned down in street execution." It was one of the most sensational mob killings in American history, and it signaled the end of the old order. The man who once ruled with quiet authority now lay lifeless under a white sheet, surrounded by the glow of police car lights. In the shadows, John Gotti watched the aftermath unfold from a nearby car. The Gambino family would never be the same again. In the weeks following Castellano's murder, New York's underworld convulsed with uncertainty. Law enforcement suspected Gotti almost immediately, but the new boss moved quickly to consolidate power. He held a secret meeting to reassure other families that peace would continue. Castellano's death marked a shift in the mafia's philosophy. Under Castellano, secrecy and business-like operations had been paramount. Under Gotti, flamboyance and public celebrity became the new norm. Historians remain divided about Paul Castellano's legacy. To some, he was a visionary who tried to modernize the mafia. He dreamed of transforming organized crime into a quasi-corporation, minimizing violence and maximizing profit. Others see him as an arrogant, disconnected figure whose elitist approach alienated his own soldiers. His murder became a cautionary tale, a reminder that in the mafia, even the boss is expendable. It is worth noting how often Castellano's story appears in popular culture. Documentaries on networks like A&E and History Channel revisit his rise and fall. Films about the mafia often feature characters inspired by Castellano's life. The calculating boss who trades street muscle for business suits. In literature, his reign symbolizes the mafia's struggle between tradition and modernity. Yet, despite the headlines and Hollywood dramatizations, the man behind the title remains an enigma. The FBI's secret recordings reveal glimpses of a complex figure, fastidious about details, fiercely protective of his financial empire, capable of cold detachment, but equally obsessed with maintaining a facade of respectability. Power, betrayal, legacy. These words still echo around Paul Castellano's name. Even in the age of social media, his story remains relevant, a stark warning about ambition, loyalty, and how quickly an empire built on secrecy can crumble. In the end, Castellano's life was both a reflection and a cautionary tale of the American dream twisted into the American underworld. He rose from the son of a Brooklyn butcher to the heights of power, only to discover that in La Cosa Nostra, the throne is built on shifting sands, and the price of the crown is often paid in blood. You've been watching Big Paul, from Brooklyn butcher to Gambino mafia boss, the path to power. A story of ambition, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of power in America's criminal underworld. For more true crime documentaries, subscribe and join us next time as we uncover the secrets behind the world's most notorious figures. Thank you for watching. Would you like this formatted as a teleprompter script, split into episodes, or adapted for a particular platform? Netflix, YouTube, History Channel, etc. Let me know how else I can tailor it for you.